Education Committee meeting. Today we have a presentation by Mrs. Kowalski and Mr. Hoffman about the math curriculum, 6 to 12 math curriculum, which is going through its review cycle, and we're in year 3. So we're excited to hear an update on that. And before we get to the presentations, I would ask Dr. Yanni if there are any announcements.
There's just one announcement this evening. Parents and guardians of students in grades 6 through 12 will be receiving a letter early next week about an equity and inclusion survey that we're going to be doing at Sandy Run Middle School and at Upper Dublin High School. As part of our equity work, the survey has been validated by Harvard, and it focuses on students' perception of equitable practices and inclusion in their schools. And then we'll be using the data from that survey to drive some student focus groups.
Thank you, Dr. Yanni. Minutes from the February meeting. Are there any comments on the minutes? Okay, then I think we move those to the legislative meeting, right? All right, then it is time for the presentation that we are all here for, and thank you to those of you in the audience for your interest in joining us. So, you want to start?
So Mrs. Kowalski and I are here to give some overview of where we are. As Ms. Shapiro said, we are in stage 3 of the curriculum review cycle for mathematics. Part of that review was the piloting of illustrative math, which we discussed, and seeing what our proposed next steps will be. This is the first of 2 presentations. I want to emphasize the first of 2 presentations. We're in the process of piloting, so we have the information we have right now as we continue to look through that. Additionally, some of the information not about IM, but more specifically about Alex, about acceleration, and about some other, the UV team, for instance, and how we're doing with the UV team in their first year at the high school in 9th grade. Not just for math, but for all courses. We are looking at that, and we'll unpack that a little bit whenever we get to that section of the presentation. But I just wanted to kind of give an overview of what we're hoping to accomplish today. You can see that we're going to begin with points of pride, and I like to start with points of pride whenever we look at any work, because a program or a resource is just that, a program or a resource, but it's only a piece of what we do every day and the hard work that our teachers do every day on behalf of each and every student. And so I think it is important when times get rough and the work gets hard that we do step back and say, what are we proud of from a big perspective? And so we will be looking at some points of pride. I asked to look at it from a 6 to 12 perspective, but Mrs. Kowalski said we've got a lot to be proud of K-12, and she'll share some of that with you. Also want to look at an updated Upper Dublin School District math sequence, which will reflect some of the changes that came into play this year and where we'll be going from there. I want to overview the professional learning for teachers that has impacted not only illustrative math, but also the standard work that Mrs. Kowalski has been leading with the department. And then I know there was a question, I believe last month, about the impact that the sequence change from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2 to geometry has had, and we'll discuss that a little bit and discuss next steps. So I'm going to turn it over to Mrs. Kowalski to walk us through some of this information, and then we'll take your questions at the end, all right?
Hey, hello everybody. So we'll just jump right in. So some of our points of pride. First I wanted to point out our computer science. We're growing in computer science is fabulous. We've had another round of successful family code nights run by Chris Hayden and some of our seniors here at the high school. I think he's doing an amazing job bringing computer science tangible to our community, exciting the students so that they want to take more and be more involved in computer science, which is definitely a 21st century skill that we're encouraging in our students. With that, we are running a new course for the first time next year. It's programming with Python. This will give us 4 years of computer science opportunities for our students. So we're super excited about that. Amy Gong, who helped with the Family Code Nights, actually just was recognized as one of the winners of the 2020 Greater Philadelphia Affiliate Awards. That's for the National Center for Women and Information Technology for aspirations in computing. So that's very exciting for Amy. We're very excited for her. I know Chris Hayes has been very supportive of all of his students, so it's just a nice recognition. Overall, mathematically, we just got the results earlier. They took a 25-question exam at a time limit, and you have to get a very high score. It's very, very challenging, so we're very excited that we have 3 of our very own competing in the next round. When I was asked to highlight points of pride, I just couldn't not put that I'm proud of our staff as a whole, 6 to 12. I think the growth from when I took this position 6 years ago to now has been amazing to watch. I encourage you to jump into any classroom and see what the teachers are doing. They're open to people coming in, and they're proud of their work. They're proud of their students' work, and I would encourage it. You'll see a lot of student discourse. You'll see kids working in groups. You'll see kids problem solving. You won't see a teacher in front of the classroom for 51 minutes or 90 minutes or 80 minutes, whatever grade level you're in. It changes depending on the grade. But it's been amazing, and they're passionate about their work, and they're excited, and I hope that you see some of that when we highlight some of the points that the teachers are saying about the new program and what they're doing in their classes. And again, it's a huge point of pride for myself. Additionally, we have our statistics courses here. This is our first year running 5 sections of statistics, so statistics is growing in popularity as well here at the high school. And it was our first year with our college preparatory algebra course. And while college prep is pretty much a senior course, statistics is junior senior mostly, but both courses have chosen and seen the need to incorporate financial literacy components into their courses. And if you talk to the students about what they've been doing, they really appreciate it, and they really see the value in it. And I know we had a program that wasn't run by the math department, a financial literacy piece too, which was received with I don't know, the great, what word am I looking for? Our students just really appreciate it, and they could see the real world connection, and now they understand how our mortgage works, or how our credit card works, or what they would need to save to buy a car. Or I think some of them responded like, wow, that's why my parents say that. Like, you know, so it's eye-opening for them, which is great. So I wanted to highlight that. And then just SAT, you can see there our math growth from last year to this year. I don't think 11 points as an average is anything to scoff at. I think that's some great work there by our students and our teachers and our program. This is our math sequence. Nothing too crazy of a change from what we have been doing. As you know, this year we condensed our math. We're running the Math 606, which leads into pre-algebra, which will lead into Algebra 1, Algebra 2. We have a lot of eras going on here after Algebra 2, and that's really to encourage, options for our students. It doesn't have to be Algebra 1, Algebra 2, Geometry, Math Analysis. We have our college prep algebra course. We have statistics now available. If they want to go on to calculus, yes, they do need math analysis because that's our pre-calculus course, so that arrow only goes one direction.
But we would highlight that Math 606 is our 6th grade math class. In any course, if you follow the path through, Math 606 can get you to calculus by senior year if that's your goal, can get you to statistics, or can get you to the college preparatory course. So there are no artificial barriers in terms of progressing based on that first 6th grade course.
What's not noted on this chart, but I think it's worth noting, as Ms. Kowalski said, this year in 6th grade we eliminated the lowest level 6th grade math. Next year the lowest level 7th grade math gets eliminated, and the following year in 8th grade. This year we also eliminated the lowest level Algebra 1 class. Next year the lowest level Algebra 2 class goes, and then we will continue that progression with the idea that we're elevating all students and not putting students in low-level tracks.
As Mr. Hoffman mentioned, we do have university of Delaware working with us this year, and the response and feedback has been phenomenal from them. I don't think we would have, this year wouldn't look the same if we didn't have the support we've been getting from the University of Delaware. I can't say enough positive things about the trainers that they're sending to us, how well versed and educated they are themselves in what's best for students and how to organize the structure of your lesson, how to reach the kids. They've come in and coached our staff one-on-one. They've come in and done demo lessons for all of our teachers. One of the trainers, Faith Muirhead, came into the high school and literally taught 6 lessons of Algebra 1 in a row so that every single one of our teachers had the opportunity to watch her in action. And I'm still in awe of her. She's like one of my favorite people now. She really knows what she's doing, and it's been wonderful, wonderful support. They are coming in pretty much every single one of our half-day professional development days and unpacking the next unit for us, with us. And it's not just, here's the material, it's she's making us do the activities, and this is the way you could support it using Desmos or Pear Deck, and it's really just been absolutely phenomenal. So I thank you for approving that last year. Additionally, we have, like I said, an amazing math department, and they really are well versed in a lot of the new technology out there mathematically. So our own department members, Maureen Hayden, Chris Hayden, Mike Morgan, Stephanie Utart, have been offering sessions for our math department using Pear Deck, Desmos, and Alex. So it's been an awesome year. If you ask any of the math department, they've loved every single PT day and just appreciate it and would like more of it, more of these things. Referencing our math sequence changes, last year was the first year all of our students went from Algebra 1 to Algebra 2. Previously, that was just the course our accelerated students would take, so they might have Algebra 1 in 8th grade, then Algebra 2 in 9th grade, and right on to geometry. So now all of our students are in it. This year is the first time any of our geometry students could be recommended for math analysis because they would already have the prerequisites of Algebra 1 and Algebra 2. Or like we had said, college prep algebra is an option now too. And then next year will be the first time we really see, so I can't speak as Dave was saying, it's kind of a 2-part thing, we're kind of living it. Next year would be the first time our math analysis teachers are seeing what it feels like for all of our students to have come in that pathway. Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and geometry. So far we have nothing, I mean it's been great. I don't have. Oh yeah, and I think I mentioned that when we first made the change, one of our major reasons, not only did we feel the progression was natural to take Algebra 1 and then Algebra 2, the SAT made huge changes in the way that they test our students, and they cut the geometry portion down to less than 10%. So we felt extremely important. We wanted all of our students to have 2 full years of algebra under their belt before they went to take the SAT. So now every kid will kind of take SAT for the first time while they're in geometry. So they're in living geometry, but they've already had 2 full years of algebra. Okay, so here we're getting into the illustrative math. There's a lot written on this slide, so I just looked at Dave. I don't know if you want me to give you a minute to read it, or if you'd like me to summarize that for you. So IM math is problem-based, right? It was developed by extremely intelligent people that really took a full look at the standards and how we can best tie everything into each other. I've never seen a more intentional, laid out design of a curriculum before. 6 to algebra, 2 geometry is just so well designed and well placed. It really gets the kids thinking. Like I said, you're not going to see a teacher in front of the room direct instructing all the time. They're really asked to analyze problems themselves. The synthesis piece is huge with this program. Probably the most important piece is the synthesis. So they may play with the math for a little bit. They get to talk to a partner or a group, and then the whole class really brings it back together, understanding, and making sense of the mathematics. Every lesson kind of follows that same pattern, so they have a launch, the synthesis piece, and so while it's very challenging mathematically, it's also very routine, which is great for students.
I could just jump in for just 1 second. So the way IM is laid out is based on brain research, so how kids understand and are able to internalize concepts. So when you go into a classroom now, it's no longer the teachers immediately conveying information, doing 4 or 5 practice problems, and then kids doing a problem set. It's really taking kids and making them active learners and help them make sense of the math. And one of the things we were talking about, I was talking about with someone today, our strongest math students are the ones that at the beginning of the year felt a little uncomfortable, because it's not just about getting the right answer anymore. It's about getting the right answer and being able to explain how you arrived there. So it's really multifaceted.
And then just to update pilots, the pilots exist. Every teacher is piloting in the middle school. So 6th grade, 606 is piloting in, as well as our pre-algebra is dabbling in the IM as well. 7th grade decided they wanted to go full hog in Math 7 and pre-algebra, so both courses are fully kind of living the IM experience. 8th grade is using it in pre-algebra, and then actually our Algebra 1 teachers just started their first unit of IM on solving systems of equations within the last week. I actually got to observe one of them, and it was pretty awesome. They are when they're asked to notice and wonder something, these kids can really take it to the next level. High school Algebra 1 is using it, and our High school Algebra 2 is, again, taking units of it and piloting it as it fits best for the kids. I already kind of talked about the University of Delaware there, but again, could not be here and speaking so highly of it without the proper training. It's just been phenomenal. This is the Ed report that just came out on illustrative 6 to 8, and you can see through all their standards that they're using, it's scoring top scores across the board. And I think if you had asked our teachers as well, we did ask our teachers, but if they had the same numerical grading system, you probably would have gotten very similar results. They love the intentional design. The rigor is there. It really is challenging our students to think and explain the reasoning behind the mathematics, and it is very user-friendly. These were just some highlights I wanted to point out. As Dr. Yanni had mentioned, 6th grade is 606. Now there's not 2 levels, and it was just interesting when we were looking at the STAR results, the growth that's been achieved from our fall benchmark to our winter benchmark in our new circumstances here. So you can see we went from a 69% to 77 in just a few short months of the program. I couldn't believe, I thought that was an amazing growth rate with our students. The next slide is our 9th grade Algebra 1 students. You're probably not going to be as impressed with the number, I'm hesitating to, but it's where we've collapsed the level, and we're really working hard to meet the needs of all our students, and it had a pretty significant growth rate as well. I know the number is not where we want it to be, seeing 17 and 26. I was just telling Mr. Hoffman, I probably should have run the Algebra 1 scores as well, so you could see that we're probably in the 80 and 90th percentile there, but I just wanted to highlight the work of the 9th grade courses and how IM is affecting it. We surveyed our students to see how they felt about IM. We asked them questions like comparing last year's math course to this year's math course. What are you noticing? What do you like? What's different? And these were some of their responses. Would you like me to read them? I don't know how small they're. You're just looking. And then there were questions specifically about the intention of IM, because you have the warm up, the synthesis, the activities, and the cool down. And you can see that the kids touched on those things as well.
So we surveyed all teachers who were part of the pilot, asking them a few questions. One, are you needing to supplement the IM materials? What are successes that you're having with the IM program? What are some of the struggles that you're experiencing with that program? What are, if you could restart your year knowing what you know now, what would you do? What would next steps be recommended? What next steps would be recommended for us in terms of the program? And what we did was compiled some of the themes here in some of the comments that recurred the most. And you can read all of these. I just want to highlight the reason why we picked some of these. With the first comment, the idea of the lesson building upon the individual components, but in a really broken down, lots of movement in the lesson, short stints. You know, you often hear with brain research that really 8 minutes of direct instruction for typical students is about where you reach capacity and need 2 minutes of recap processing in order to hit the next. So there's a lot of research why, you know, a 90-minute lecture does not work for students. IM is built in that way that it's really a 2 or 3 minute warm-up activity, then a 10-minute lesson that allows them to synthesize and process, and then that cool-down piece. Also, it's really nice that we see students seeing this as big picture, concrete, visual. The deeper understanding as never before is really what we're seeing when students, Dr. Yanni and I had a conference call with one of the teachers this morning, and she just said, I just got to say, I just taught the best lesson ever, and I'm so excited. So, and it was a teacher who's piloting this, and you know, teachers are excited at the end of their lessons, and that's exciting news. In terms of the challenges, you want to hit the next slide? What we're finding overwhelmingly is that teachers are struggling with the idea of practice, that there not being enough practice. And I'll ask Meg to speak to this a little bit. Not enough practice for some of the concepts. Where we're digging into that a little bit is it our typical understanding of how much practice we typically were doing in a given lesson, and that this program being so research and brain focused is showing us that we don't need business as usual, or is really the practice itself lacking a little bit where we need to supplement it. So that's one of the things that we're looking at. Obviously, I mean, I love, you know, importance go to school kids. There's the line that when students miss a day, there's a lot that they miss, and that's typical in any situation. So we're looking for ways to circle back to there. The UDEL trainers have been really useful, particularly in helping us understand how to implement these lessons with the minutes that our schedule is allowing us. And as we look at our schedules and we look at kind of best practice and we're unpacking these lessons, we'll continue to find ways to develop that. This is a program that we can embed additional practice and take time with Meg's focus on the standards to build those resources. Do you want to talk a little bit about the practice piece?
So if you do talk to any of our teachers, like they've mentioned, the big conceptual ideas are being understood like they never have before, because they're really taking the time to make meaning of the problems. However, we are finding that students still, especially our students that struggle with retention and need that repetition, it's not built into the curriculum. The homework problems are about anywhere from 4 to 6 problems long, where 3 of them are the day's content and 3 of them spiral back, which is amazing in itself too, that we're constantly revisiting old ideas. But we do find for some of our students that's just not enough. And we're not trying to, you know, load them up with homework. We would like to have the practice built within the lessons as well. But it's the same kind of thing. There's the big talk and discussion of the synthesis, which is wonderful. But then they don't have additional practice built in. So it's something that we are finding that we need to probably add in ourselves, and we have been this year as necessary.
Now moving forward, teachers are saying yes, please. We want to continue our work with this. You know, all of them had a really nice answer to, if I could restart this, what would I do? None of them said I would run away or I would please go back to what I was doing. They're saying, you know, I would have maybe looked a little bit at the standards so that I could have planned out a little bit differently. Would have maybe thought to embed some of that additional practice or had some of those additional options. But our teachers do want to continue to look at this in ways that they can continue to see how the impact will be from year to year, impacting our math sequence.
So this is just a couple snapshots of some data, as Mr. Hoffman had mentioned as well. Part 2 will be heavy on data analysis and the things that we're looking at. But these are our PSSA, and the far right, Upper Dublin, is the Algebra Keystone Proficient and Advanced over the last 5 years. So I just want to highlight, there's been, you know, almost nothing but growth every year as our program has been developing and our teachers have been involved in professional development. We spent a lot of time on formative assessment. We've really been working on questioning techniques the last few years, and I think all of that is really paying off. And with the way this year is going, I'm very excited to see what the results will be with our pilot. These are areas, as I mentioned, I'm looking forward to hoping to have this all in a nice package for you in April. So we've been looking at the Linkit reports, did a 5-year analysis by content standard and eligible content anchors. So we're looking into that, trying to find patterns in areas that celebrate what we're doing really well, but also if there's general overall arching patterns of things that maybe we're not hitting as hard as we should. We want to take a look at that. Again, has already been mentioned, there's been a question out there, is there a significant difference in our math student performance in grade 9 after 8th grade? Because 8th grade does have a couple different unique situations for our students. We have the UV team where they have an ALEC space. We have the pilot of IM going on. We have teachers that are using the standards but kind of picking and choosing resources that they've come to know and love over the last few years. So we're looking at that. We're looking at their report card scores. So how are they doing in their current classes at the high school? So marking period 1, marking period 2, midterm. We're going to attach their last year PSSA scores, their Keystone results if they were in Algebra 1, as well as their STAR scores, and really do a thorough analysis and see if there's any statistical evidence that one way is proving better than the other for our students, or if all methods are equally great for them. So we're still waiting on our spring STAR benchmark scores, and then obviously next year, this summer, we'll take a look, which is what I'm most excited about, to see how we're doing with the 2020 results upcoming. Yep.
Thank you very much for this presentation. I think it's very clear that math, the way it was happening in the world and in our classrooms a couple of years ago, is definitely changing. And I'm very excited that we're moving from the computational components to more interpretation, analysis, and also collaborative work, because that's definitely how our students will be using their math in their futures. So that's really exciting. I think at this point I would like any committee members if they have questions, and then we'll open it up to the whole board.
I have a couple questions. First one is Code Night, which is very popular, and has there been given thought to maybe expanding it? I know in the past we've had people sign up and it's full, so maybe adding, and also there's some rules that are sort of restrictive, like 1 parent per child. Like there has to be a 1-to-1 ratio, so for people who have multiple children that would be interested in going. So that's my first question.
That's a great question. I'll have to look into it. I think the restrictions are probably due to the size of the space, unfortunately, and time. They are seniors running it as their culminating projects. But it's certainly worth, I could bring it back to them and ask if they would increase the nights, and thank you.
And then the next question is, how is the math program, the illustrative math, being received by special ed teachers and our students with GIPs? Are we seeing growth in that area too?
So to answer your first question, at the high school, one of our co-teachers is in the special ed department, and she's got great feedback on it. The curriculum itself has amazing entry points for all of our students. That warm-up that every lesson begins with gives everybody access to the lesson. If I could have posted all of the student responses, many of them commented on that, like they like it. If I could have done one of those word clouds, the word fun would have come up a lot. Like they're really enjoying it. So I do think because of the way it's structured, I teach the curriculum myself. I teach 3 sections of it, and when I'm talking to my colleagues that are also teaching it, we're equally impressed with all of our students' ability to articulate the math now. Students that you would have never thought could read function notation and tell you exactly what it means and it's very cool. And you'll have to remember your second question.
Students are we looking at the students, with the GIEPs, are we seeing them grow? Because they kind of start off maybe ahead of the game a little bit.
Well, as Dr. Yadni actually mentioned, they're the ones that, like, at the very beginning struggle just a bit because they just want to go, 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 and this is forcing them to stop and think about not just one way to solve the problem, but many ways to solve the problem, which I think in turn will serve them well in the higher mathematics that they haven't had before.
Okay, just a couple of questions regarding the benchmark data. Obviously you said 9th grade data isn't, stellar. So I'm just wondering what is our plan in terms of addressing some of those issues? Because obviously at the end of the year, we want them at a certain point, and where they are right now, it seems to me there's a lot of work to do to get them where we would want them to be.
Yes. So that was just one snapshot of them, their STAR report. I could say, there's so many pieces to the puzzle. We just had midterm exams at the high school. That's a very tough, long exam, and overall we were very pleased with how our Algebra 1 students scored on that. It covered a lot of concepts, and they, for the most part, handled it pretty well. I think STAR for them maybe doesn't hold as great a weight when they're taking it, so it's a little hard to interpret all the data as accurately as we would like. We are looking at, as we come up on Keystones, ways to address some of the needs of our students. We're looking into attaching them, perhaps using Alex for our current Algebra 1 students as a way for them to, take their knowledge checks and see this is where I need to work, so they can help focus their areas of need as well. We have
And they've also been looking specifically at some of the standards needs and directly targeting those standards in station rotations with one-on-one teacher instruction or one-on-small group teacher instruction that's helping to target those areas that the data is showing us. But that was just one small piece that we were trying to show that we were having near double-digit growth across the board with IM, but recognizing where the students were starting at a level, that is a little lower.
I think it's important to note too, I know some people are tired of hearing me say this, but the kids that are in in Algebra 1 in 9th grade, those kids were put in low-level 6th grade math, 7th grade math, and 8th grade math. So they have not had the same exposure to the rigorous type of instruction that we would expect our kids to get. And so one of the rationale points for eliminating lowest level math over time is to make sure that all kids have access to really rigorous instruction. I think I said a couple meetings ago, I understand why the district adopted Carnegie when they did. It was the only math program on the market that was even somewhat aligned to the Common Core standards. Now that we're really looking at standards and saying what do kids need versus just following the sequence of a program, I think what we're going to see in pretty short order is some significant improvement in our students because we're targeting instruction more specifically to what they need to be successful in the course that they're in and get ready for the subsequent course.
So IM is implemented in which classes? That's how I was confused.
Yeah,
Stops
I'm
at
sorry,
algebra
because
two?
we are dabbling a little bit, aren't we? Math 606 is using IM.
Oh, okay.
6th grade pre-algebra is using pieces of IM, trying out units.
Right.
7th grade 7 math and pre-algebra are using IM. That was the teacher's choice. They wanted to do it for both courses.
And so eventually, where will it be implemented?
6th through algebra. Algebra.
And statistics? That's-
Not statistics. They actually don't offer a statistics course.
Okay, so it's all the way through algebra 2.
And they've just this year working on K-5 as well. So that's something that once we watch 6 through algebra 2 and see that impact as K-6 comes through their curriculum review cycle, ideally that would be something that we would be looking at to see if it has the impact.
You made a significant financial investment on the new language arts curriculum. I haven't seen anything on this yet. What is it?
It's open source, so by that there are no fixed costs. The costs are really the consumables that we would buy, so there isn't that very large upfront cost, like in other programs. Well, right, and the professional development. I mean, the cost really that the district had this year was for the professional development. But one thing I want to just stress for the folks that are not in this room and might be watching at home, when you hear that we're using pieces of that, a lot of times in the past, when you've heard, well, we've not implemented a program totally or with fidelity, that was a bad thing. This is more of a framework and a way of thinking about math. So we don't want our teachers lockstep going through every single page and every single problem. We want them to be nimble and agile so that they're following their kids. So what is it that their kids need to be successful with the standards of the course? So there's an art and science of teaching. We want kids in Algebra 1 to learn Algebra 1. It does not mean that you have to be through the entire Algebra 1 workbook. So that's why you might hear us say that we're using pieces of it or units of it. We're not using it in its totality.
How many units? Do we require 4 units of math at the high school?
Three credits of math at the high school.
3 years.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So I'm trying to follow the sequence. So eventually that sequence, most students would go straight through the top and they're recommended to take geometry, right? And then after geometry, which would be in 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th, after 10th grade, if they go to college, they can either go to college prep or math or statistics.
Mm-hmm.
But if they're taking algebra 2, they can also drop down to statistics.
Right. I know it's a little confusing. The only prerequisite for statistics is to have completed algebra 2. So that's why it's kind of the error right there.
Okay. But
And Dr. Levinovitz, you asked about, we require 3 credits of math, but the vast majority of our kids wind up taking 4 credits of math.
right.
Or more, because they may double up in a year. So I don't want to give anybody the impression that, 9th, 10th, and 11th, and then they're done. So many of our kids take 4 or more.
So the college prep algebra, what is that?
So it is aligned to Montgomery County Community College course, Matt,
Okay.
Matt 100. So, and they did complete that course, I might have missed Matt 100. I can't remember the exact number, but they completed that semester, up through midterms, and now they are doing that financial literacy piece. So it really, I mean, if you talk to the teacher that's teaching it this year for the first time, she's in love with the program. It really wraps up all of the math that they've completed leading up to that course and prepares them for the next level. So whether they're taking college entrance exams for mathematics, or they're going to like a Williamson's trade school that requires the math test, they feel ready from what she's been getting feedback from her students.
But it's also a very academically diverse class, right? So I've been in several times, and you have some kids that might need that extra boost in math, but then you also have kids that wanted to take another math course but weren't necessarily looking to take calculus or math analysis, but they wanted to take something that they also felt was going to be beneficial. And so, you know, you get the dual enrollment credit in the first half of the course, and now,
Is that dual?
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's aligned to
aligned,
that.
yes.
Yeah, sorry, yeah, so what is it? But
It's not dual, you don't
it's
get a
not dual
dual
enrollment,
enrollment.
but it's aligned, so you get that experience, but then in the second half of the course, as Ms. Kowalski said, now there's some real life application of math, what it looks like out in the real world.
Financial literacy. Is there an opportunity for all or most of our high school students now, when they graduate, to have taken, it may not be a full course, but a course that incorporates a lot of the financial literacy? So I know that's a topic we've been talking about for many, many years.
Yes, we have these two options in math that are covering this topic. We also have our personal finance course that covers that topic, and per our discussion at program studies time regarding Governor Wolf's signing of the bill with personal finance, that's a topic that we're looking at in teaching and learning right now, of expanding that opportunity and next steps to make some recommendations about that once we finish that exploration.
Okay. And I'll just ask one more question. Is the programming computer science chart on the same page as the math sequence? That's somewhat confusing. Are you saying that they can take?
There's a lot of arrows there. Let's see
What
if
are
I
the
can
arrows?
explain this.
What do the
Yeah.
arrows mean?
So
What would they first take, where they have an option?
the recommendation would be program with Python if that was going to be your first course. It's the most user-friendly Python languages. Computer Science 1 is a dual enrollment course, so and it covers way more than just an intro to programming. So if you're
Montgomery County?
So if you were just beginning your journey in computer science, you would start with a Python course, you would go on to CS1, and then you could take one or the other. The APs can be taken in either order.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Franz.
So a little bit more in terms of the sequence, for someone like me that is not familiar with math analysis and what that means, and also piggybacking on that, you know, Dr. Yanni's mentioned at several meetings, sort of college and universities looking favorably on statistics as a high school course and not necessarily needing to get to Cal BC. So I guess I'm curious about what are the guidance counselors recommending for different kinds of kids? Say a kid wants to go into chemistry or physics in college university level. What is the thinking sort of, and where does this math analysis piece fit in? Because I'm not really sure what it covers.
So math analysis is like our pre-calculus, trigonometry mesh of a course. It has a little.
Everyone has to take that one, or am I misreading this?
No.
So from geometry, would you just go?
If I was a 10th grader in geometry and I was looking for my junior year, I would have, and I would hope this is something the guidance counselors are talking about too, but if my goal was something calculus related, a field that I was going to need to take calculus, I should be encouraged to take math analysis, as that's a pre-calculus course with the trigonometry piece, so that I'd be ready to take calculus.
So I think you answered my question. So math analysis is pre-calc and trig.
Yes.
Those are words I know. Okay. Thank you.
Mr. Swerve?
I have a few
So, following up on with the statistics question, I understand it, so it's there because the only prerequisite is Algebra 2, but is that really where most people take it right after Algebra 2?
No, not necessarily.
Yeah. I know that there are a bunch of kids who take it after calculus because there's no other math choice left. But it's not necessarily based on calculus or as advanced, as rigorous or challenging, I guess I should say, a topic as calculus might be.
And we actually have a surprising number of students that take AP statistics as a second math the year they're in calculus.
Okay.
Or math analysis.
So in the moving forward slide, the comments about moving forward from teachers, I'm trying to find, it's not actually numbered, but the first and last comments both, and Dr. Yanni, both implied that this IM is not directly tied to Pennsylvania state standards. Did I get that correctly?
Right, it was designed with the Common Core standards.
It is Common Core compliant, but not necessarily Pennsylvania Core.
Right, and there, the 6th and 7th grade level, the alignment is about 88%. It's a little bit higher in 8th grade in Algebra 1. My comment was more about how we look at standards and say, you know, my kids are deficient in this standard. Do I need to teach this lesson, or they already have that knowledge? Can I skip over that lesson?
Okay. The reason I ask really is, so I understand why we chose Carnegie, as you pointed out, and clearly alignment to standards was important then. And maybe it's, you know, we're figuring this isn't perfectly aligned to the standards that we're tied to, but we can make it work. Is that a fair characterization?
I would say our work as a district is aligning our courses and our curriculum implementation to the state standards. This is a framework that is helping us to do that, but it's not a program that we say, page 1, Monday, chapter 1,
Yeah.
state standard 1. We don't, as long as I'm here, and I believe
Yeah,
Dr. Ronnie would say the same thing,
totally
we're not,
with you, yeah.
we're not looking for that.
Yeah, good. And so presumably there was some process by which Carnegie was determined to be not working for us. Are we using that same process to determine whether, or will we use that same process in the future to determine whether IM is working for us? Is that already defined? Do we know what our measures of success are here? I mean, clearly it seems to be going well so far, but 2, 3, 4 years from now, how do we know?
So we'll put a little bit of stock in the math PSSAs, because I think even when you look among our peer group of districts, our performance was not that far off, but we were missing something. When Carnegie came out and said they were Common Core aligned, they aligned before the Common Core standards were actually even passed. So they were really aligned to an iteration of, the very first iteration of the Common Core standards. So we'll be looking at yearly how our kids are performing on state assessments, and then inside each year how we're moving kids through our local assessment STAR and whatnot, so that if we see areas where there are gaps, we can modify or enhance to make sure that we're not missing those areas.
And K through 1 through 5 of the curriculum cycle is looking at issues of, when we look at our data, is it a problem with learning? Is it a problem with practice? Is it a problem with resources? And in any, I can't speak to the adoptions and the causes of what went here, but I can say that we have documents in place now with our newly adopted curriculum review cycle that reviews and determines if the pilot is or the program that we're looking at meets the needs of the problem of learning or problem of practice. So we're fully assessing that point by point.
Okay, and then just to follow up on, I think it was Jen's comment earlier. I'd like to be confident that as we're looking at those kinds of analyses, that we're breaking it down by type of student. You know, if a student is either accelerated or gifted, or both, that we are breaking that out and saying, does this work for them? If not, how can we modify appropriately? With the understanding that those students inherently aren't fitting quite perfectly in the box, and we don't have to necessarily make them fit in the box, but we need some way to address their needs. So I just, I hope they'll be broken out separately and determine does this product work for them as well.
And I would, Mark, say yes, and take it a step further, that we're not looking at groups of students, we're looking at individual students. So if there's an individual need, we can't make an assumption any longer that the student is struggling in math, period. We have to step back and say the student is struggling with concept X and how we're going to reteach or refocus that instruction, which again is why we would adopt or ask to adopt programs that provide that framework like F&V and IM that allows us that flexibility. So we're not just looking at groups, we're looking at individuals, but certainly we're looking to make sure that what we are doing does meet the needs of all students.
I think what the board has to, you'll see this as we do more curriculum work and more adoptions, we would not be bringing forth a program that wasn't good for all kids. So last year when we looked at what, Meg, about 8 different math programs. So we looked, what I'll say is out of those 8, I think 5 of those 8 would teach to the middle kid, like the average kid in your class. What I think is very different about illustrative is there are so many entry points for kids that whether you need it to be enriching, whether you need a little bit more scaffolding, or whether you're that average, hardworking math student, there are entry points, and that's really what attracted us to illustrative. I know we looked at the continuation of Eureka, because Eureka did a middle school program, and it was too much like elementary, and we discussed at length our concerns in elementary. We looked at the updated Carnegie, we looked at CPM, college preparatory math, and I'm sorry, integrated math, and all of those really, when we looked at the teacher materials, the support for teachers, it was all about sort of teaching the kid in the middle of your class, where we felt like illustrative, because it was developed based on brain research, allowed us to meet the needs of more kids inside that program.
All right, it's good to hear. Thanks. That's it.
Any other questions?
Just really 2 comments. Under your further review in the data collection slide, you talk about everything that's going on with this 8th grade math program. And so I'm happy to hear that you're going to analyze and see what's going on, because I think we do need to make some decisions regarding what we're going to do in that grade. We've heard comments and people aren't real sure, is it working, is it not working, are we seeing a difference? And so once you analyze everything that you're going to be looking at, I just think it's important for us to make some final decisions about where we're going in 8th grade. Secondly, you talked about the college prep program being aligned with the community colleges program. And so I'm just wondering, as you're looking in the future, if indeed it is already aligned, is that a course that we can actually award our students dual enrollment?
So it is aligned, and I think I said the wrong number. I believe it's MAC 001. So it would be a pre-credit college course with the intent of, we had been hearing that many of the students would be taking the math entry exam to one of their colleges and be asked to perhaps take one of those pre-credit courses. So we were encouraging offering it here. Monca met with us and came in and talked, and they said, taking this course will guarantee your students they're going to be absolutely ready, they're going to pass, and they'll be able to start at the entry-level mathematics of their college. So we're just giving them that extra boost that they need before they're paying college tuition rates.
We may be hopeful in that as we've realigned our entire math curriculum, and they're gonna be coming in stronger, we may be at a point where we could actually have them go into the Math 100 versus that lower level entry math, which would really be great for our students.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. I was discussing with the teacher, because we could have the opportunity to teach the 001 first semester and the 100 second semester. It's something we are looking at.
All right, I still have a few left in my questions. So, first of all, we got rid of the geometry sandwich, or whatever you want to call it, right? It used to be Algebra 1, then Geometry, then Algebra 2. Do you have any sense how that switch, I mean, you explained that it was before to support or get students more aligned with the SAT, and I just wanted to get a sense how that's working. I mean, do you see benefits to that reversal other than the SAT scores?
Right. So definitely see benefits from students exiting Algebra 1, entering Algebra 2. We were able to jump we still review some Algebra 1 concepts, so we were able to start the Algebra 2 curriculum much earlier than in years past, where we were spending some time, helping the students remember all of the stuff they learned 2 years ago. So that has been wonderful, that progression. To speak to if we've noticed a big change, I can't until the following year, because we're waiting for those kids to get to wherever they would be on that 4th math course after the 3. So we're waiting to see when they enter math analysis. They had Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and then geometry. How is that affecting their ability to jump into pre-calculus topics or trigonometry topics? Now we're anticipating the trigonometry topics are going to be quite fresh in their minds. And our thought is our geometry programs are pretty algebra intensive now. So we don't think there's going to be any detriment to the students, only benefits. But I wouldn't be able to speak to it officially until it happens next year.
No, that sounds good, and we look forward to hearing more of an update on that. Then in the computer program, or in the computer science area, are any of those courses semester courses at this point?
No, they are full year.
Do you think that it might be attractive for students to actually enter into something that is maybe not a full year commitment? I mean, I'm thinking especially of groups who might be underrepresented currently in those kind of courses, if that is something that you're considering.
Yes. We need to review the high school schedule to make that happen. We don't currently offer any semester courses, and that's something that Dr. Young and I both agree needs to happen.
And just as a reminder, we're in the process of redeveloping the Sandy Run schedule for next year. So this time next year, we'll be in the process of redesigning the high school schedule. Because there are a number of things that we need to revise inside both of our secondary schedules.
Right. We're moving right along. The AP Calculus A, B, and BC courses. I know that there's overlap between sections. I mean, they both have the B in there. Is there? No, but that's essentially how it is. Is there any consideration? Sorry. is there any consideration of giving students the opportunity to do AB or go straight to BC and then maybe allowing for a further math course, discrete algebra, linear? I mean, there's a host of other maybe a little bit more advanced or more more interesting courses perhaps, or other courses that address other interests than the calculus.
Yes, I would say yes again. With curriculum review, I mean, that's part of what we do. We're looking at what are the trends, what do the enrollment look like, what are the local and national trends, what do universities look like, what do college career readiness look like, and what courses are we ahead of the game or behind the game on, and that becomes part of the process. So we don't want to just say, let's keep throwing new classes in recklessly. I don't think that was the recommendation either. But that's part of this newly defined process that will help us get that answer.
Great. And then this is a question I asked last time when we were talking about Fontes and Pinnell, and I'm asking it here again. When the teachers who are piloting currently the IM, were they self-selected? How did teachers end up in that pilot pool, and how are you handling that, say, next year?
So all of the teachers from grade 6 through the high school algebra 2 are piloting some form of IM. There wasn't a huge, selection for them. There wasn't really an option for them. We were trying it, we're piloting it. We want you all to have feedback. We want everybody to experience the program. What we did give option with was only one of your courses had to be IM. Had to include the IM pilot, I should say. So, like I had mentioned, 7th grade chose to do all of their courses because they wanted to.
So that also means that all teachers have benefited from the professional development, which seems like that is being a huge asset to this, and I'm grateful. I'm very glad to hear that is so well received, and hope that all teachers will build on that. And I would think that techniques being used also translate to other classes that they might teach that are perhaps not in that IM sequence, but still might benefit from those strategies.
Just to elaborate on that, I just was in an Algebra 2 class at Sandy Run Middle School observing, and Algebra 2 at Sandy Run is not being piloted with the IM. However, when I watched her lesson, every piece of IM was in there. It was amazing, and I commented, I was like, wow, I felt like I was watching an IM lesson, because she had the launch, and she had 3 little activities, and she had the synthesis piece and a cool down. I was like, huh. So they are, like you said, every teacher's been in the training, and they're certainly applying it into their classrooms.
That sounds like that is a big gain in this. And then finally, moving forward, do you see another year of piloting going on, or what are you thinking, or is that for next month's presentation?
It's probably a next month presentation, because we are spending some time on Monday during the in-service discussing exactly that question. So I'd rather have a little bit more feedback from my staff.
That's great. Oh, Mr. Soroda has.
Sorry, you prompted us, I thought. Yeah. Algebra 2 has historically been a popular acceleration point in our math sequence for a lot of students, often by taking it over the summer, but not exclusively. Does the switch of Algebra 2 and geometry have any implications there?
I guess I don't know. We're still seeing students that want to accelerate over the summer. They've always come in Algebra 2 or geometry. I guess historically we've had more Algebra 2 because we've offered the course here at the high school. But there's definitely been a growing increase in requests for geometry over the summer.
That's good. My personal opinion is that Algebra 2 is not actually a very good place in the curriculum to accelerate, even though that's been where we've done it for the most part.
And we're looking, I have a lot of trigger words. Acceleration has become one of them, and I finally had to say that was a conversation for later this year, that we need to have a better direction and kind of take that through process a little bit differently, because I do think it's gotten a little out of hand. You can wonder why. I think there are several reasons. Is the schedule resulting in that? Is the need to get to a certain point? Is the culture resulting in that? Is there, we're trying to make up time? Is something else competing with it? There are a lot of factors there, but we've got to really get our heads together and have a clear understanding of what we believe behind that, and stick to that. So we're going to get there and bring that around too.
And not to trigger you, Mr. Hoffman, but acceleration really at all levels we're really looking at, because, for example, at our elementary schools, we have some single subject acceleration and we have some whole grade acceleration. And I am not sold on the idea that we should be doing as much of that as we should be doing enrichment inside the content to go deeper, because what I'm worried about especially as we see upticks in mental health, anxiety in particular. We are seeing that kids that accelerate, that aren't really good candidates for acceleration, a year later, 2 years later, they are riddled with anxiety because they're having to put so much work into sort of filling their own gaps that they missed through some courses.
Yeah, I apologize for triggering Dave, and I didn't mean to get into a whole conversation about acceleration. But yeah, I mean, I'm glad that we'll be looking at that.
We'll get there. Just
Yeah.
pad the room and I'm ready to go.
All right, I think on that note, we should thank our presenters, and not just our presenters, but also the staff behind that who've done a lot of the work throughout the year, and also our students who are, I think, are taking a lot of this very well, and hopefully are ultimately the beneficiaries of this new approach. So thank you very much, and keep up the good work. All right, that gets us to the committee recommendations. There are two items there, student activities. Dr. Yanni, are there any comments on the student activities?
I don't have comments on that or on the professional conferences.
Okay. Then, are there any questions? Board? No, go ahead, Ms. Francis.
I hate to bring up the C word, coronavirus, but as we start thinking about travel, one of these is a plane travel program. I know we're taking our cues from CDC and all that jazz. Are we just ensuring that on these trips, how are we, I don't even know, how can we possibly sort of police what's happening?
So the simple answer is we're not. We're not really jazzed about international travel at this point. But you know, today we met with the Department of Health. I didn't mean to sound flippant when I said that. You know, the comment that was repeatedly said is you're no more safe or less safe in a school than you are in any type of, you know, whether you're in a train, you're in a plane, you're in the grocery store, the gas station, the movie theater, or whatever. So I think the thing that we're going to keep doing is tell people to wash their hands for 20 seconds. Does not matter the temperature of the water. I learned that today. But you must do it for 20 seconds. And if you sing happy birthday twice in your head, that is sufficient time. So wash your hands. If you use hand sanitizer, make sure that it is 60% more or more of alcohol content. And if anyone wants to look on Amazon, you can have a vat of that hand sanitizer delivered to you sometime in June.
For $275. As of right now. No, I don't think it was flippant. I think we just have this weird situation now where I think, yes, of course we're all at risk in all large public places. It's just that matter of potential state-to-state transmission. So, you know, as much as we can be supporting those kids as they travel with reminders is great.
I think the thing to keep in mind here, if I can speak up, is from the board level point of view, if there are places where we are asking our staff to go, telling our staff to go to travel, that's a different sort of thing. If we're supporting our students in, you know, the thespian conference going to Indiana, for example, something they've been looking forward to for years, every year, you know, that's different than us saying you will go get on an airplane. And so if there are students or staff who wish to opt out, we should certainly support them in that wish.
I think the only thing that I'm worried about are cancellation fees and things. You know, I don't want to be throwing good money after bad and trying to get people somewhere that's going to inevitably be canceled or postponed. And of course, we don't have crystal balls. We can't do all that. We do our best. But just something maybe we need to think a little bit about as we go forward.
Any other issues? No, okay, then we'll take that to the legislative meeting, and then it's time for community input. If you have a comment, question, please feel free to come up to the microphone and you know the drill.
Hi, thank you. I'm up here all right, I'm ready to start talking, I'm sorry. And he answered a lot of questions, which is great. But, one question I have is the ALEX program. It's not like it's like a supplemental thing that kids do at night for homework, it's literally the curriculum, so I'm not sure how, since that's self-paced, how is this IM working with that? And there was that graph with how we're improving over the years, and is that different kids, right? Throughout the year, so you're not following my kid from 5th grade, 6th grade, whatever, or 6th grade on, okay? So it's different groups of kids. And I just wanna point out, since I have one of those 9th graders, that is the year, I wanna tell you, they got Eureka in 4th grade, they got Carnegie in 6th, they lost a 6th grade math teacher when they went to 6th, and when you were ahead of class, when you did pre-AL, you actually got pushed into a 7th grade classroom at the time versus being a whole classroom of, pre-AL 6th grades. So, it might be that, with that group of kids in particular, because there was so much change. Anyway, I think that was it. Thank you.
Hi, Tanya Colon, Fort Washington. Thank you for the wonderful presentation. My question is with regards to the college preparatory algebra. I wanted to know, I think one year was just for 12th graders, now it's open to 11th and 12th graders, so we can clarify as to why this is, and possibly how many sections of the class, and is there, I heard say one teacher, so I just wanted to know how many teachers are teaching the class. Thank you.
Anybody else? No? All right, then we close community input, and Dr. Yama, do you wanna?
So the one comment about a group of students that experienced so much change, that is what complicates the data analysis a little bit when you look at a certain cohort of kids, because they have had so much change. One of the things, I've been, I don't wanna say skeptical of Alex, I've been cautious with Alex. I think when we bring the data analysis next month, we have to look at what are all the variables. So there will be kids that have not had all that change. There will be kids that have had all that change. And I can tell you, having worked in 2 other districts where 6th graders were put in 7th grade pre-algebra, that is a different experience in many ways than a whole group of, a whole classroom of 6th graders. So I think we'll, like, to the best of our ability, recreating history here a little bit, because Dave and I weren't here. Meg was probably here, so we'll tap on her historical knowledge, but to identify what each cohort of kids went through, because we know anytime there's a program, except we're not going to see it this year with IN, a dip, just like we're not seeing any snow days. Everyone knows that. So I'm told it couldn't happen next Thursday, but no, it's not. But when the district went from a traditional elementary math program to Eureka, it was so fundamentally different. Everybody was in this immense learning curve, especially because if a 4th grader, it's presupposed that you went through K1, 2, 3, and then had the 4th grade material. Same thing with Carnegie. Carnegie again was a shift from another new program. So we'll be extrapolating all of that so that we can identify what all those variables are that were thrown at kids. I'm going to ask Ms. Kowalski, can you come up to the microphone, because I don't necessarily have all the, I have an idea, but I don't want to give wrong information. College prep algebra, 12th grade or 11th and 12th grade?
College prep algebra is 12th grade.
12th grade, okay. And do we know?
11th grade could take it, that's really all.
A 12th grade course, and how many sections of that do we have?
2.
Okay. One teacher?
1 teacher.
Okay. Thank you. That's,
And
I can say that's what I thought.
Yeah, and I would just say, in terms of that story as well, that's what's complicating some of the data analysis and telling the story of, back to the point of the individual students. With the UV team, you have, it's not a pre-algebra class or an algebra 1 class or an algebra 2 class. There's a mix of students that we're really having to trace back a really difficult process. So that's kind of where we are right now.
All right, I think that addresses any of the comments. Are there any comments from the board? before we close the meeting? All right, then many thanks to anybody watching, those of you here attending, and conversations and presentation. I'm sure we are gonna hear more about this. I look forward to next month's presentation. And then as we're talking about next month, our next meeting will be on Wednesday, April 1st. No joke, 6 o'clock we'll be here in the Cardinal Room, and we take a short break and then start on the policy meeting. Thank you very much and good night.
That's like a great opportunity just for a little bit of money. You walk and it would be equivalent to the 9 days.
Don't shake my hand.
Because it's spread out. We spread it over. But this one is when we redo the high school schedule, that will become
Right, well, he wants to go this way.
Sorry, I was singing.
Oh,
I'm trying to do that. What's wrong with
That's right.
All right, I will call to order the meeting of the Policy Committee for tonight, March the 4th, 2020. For everybody that's been watching Education at Home, welcome back. And we'll get going rather quickly here. Dr. Yanni, any announcements or communications?
Last month, we looked at the medications policy, and when that went for approval, we contacted our attorney because it only focused on medication so that it would encompass any type of emergency medication that kids would need. So it wouldn't just be an auto inhaler, it wouldn't just be an EpiPen, it would be any type of emergency medication. So that was updated. And speaking with Mr. Dazio, that was a non-substantive change. So I just wanted to make everyone aware that we just broadened that term as a catch-all.
Excellent, thank you. Moving on, we have minutes from our February 5th, 2020 policy meeting. If anyone has any questions or comments, otherwise we'll move them forward to the legislative agenda. And we'll hop right into our policy issues for this month. First, we have for second reading 7 policies. They went through first reading last month. The first 5 of those, essentially, P303, 307, 311, 312, and 313, had some revisions to combine prior policies and to consolidate some prior policies. Dr. Yanni, has anything changed or anything you want to comment about those upon second reading?
No. When we talk about the suspension and furlough policy, which is 311, I just want to walk the board through what is going to be in the administrative regulation to comply with the applicable law. I don't have anything on 303. I'm not sure if anyone else did.
Anyone have anything on 303? Stan?
Just one typo there, under guidelines, says proper certification and certification the second time, so I think we should just try that certification the second time.
Good catch. Anything else on 303? Okay, we'll move that forward. 307, student teachers. Any comments or questions? Hearing none, we'll move that forward.
I would like to update the board just on what will be in the administrative regulations. So for a student teacher to come to Upper Dublin, they have to, before we'll even consider them, they have to come from a program that is recognized by the Pennsylvania Department of Education. It doesn't mean that it has to be from a college or university in Pennsylvania. It just has to be recognized by the Department of Education. So they have to complete all of their coursework. They have to have a current health examination, and they have to have current clearances. The good news is you can't student teach. Your university won't even let you go out until you have those 3 things done. But the universities always supply us with that information. We had talked internally about the number of student teachers, sort of an upper limit of what we would not want to exceed. Some districts, we're in a really prime location because we're right off the turnpike. And so there are times that we get many more requests for student teachers than we can handle. So what we said was internally that In any elementary school, we would have no more than 5 student teachers per semester. At the middle school, we would not have more than 8, and at the high school, we would not have more than 10. We typically do not come close to those numbers, but we are starting to see a small uptick of kids going back into education. And so we anticipate over the next couple of years getting some more requests for student teachers.
That's in each elementary school?
In each elementary school, right. And as superintendent, and my designee would be Mr. Hoffman, we're very intentional about who we would pair a student teacher with in terms of a cooperating teacher in one of our buildings. We want cooperating teachers that are highly effective, that have a track record of success with kids, because anytime you're putting someone in a position, to student teach, you're a rookie, you're a novice, and we want to make sure that we're supporting not only that student teacher, but we're also not putting kids in a situation where someone's trying to learn to teach and we don't have a very highly effective teacher coupled with that student teacher.
Excellent. Anything else on 307 or Dr. Young's comments before we move on? All right, we'll move that forward. 311, suspension and furloughs. Dr. Young, see if that comes back.
Sure. Just suspension and furlough, the Department of Education uses those terms interchangeably, so just so that everyone is aware. Now, there have been for a long time 3 reasons that you could furlough or suspend professional staff, and they were curtailment or elimination of programming, a decline in enrollment, or consolidation and reorganization of schools, opening or closing a school. Recently, in the last couple of years, the Department of Education has added a 4th reason, and that's furlough for economic reasons. Now, try to follow this, and if anyone can answer the questions at the end, there'll be a prize before you leave. If and when a district wants to furlough staff for economic reasons, you have to petition the Department of Education to do so, and you have to furlough the same percentage of administrative staff that you would do professional staff, okay? When you furlough for economic reasons, you have to furlough by buckets. So teachers are put into one of 4 buckets, and it has to do with their evaluations. So bucket 1 would be folks that have had 2 unsatisfactory evaluations. Theoretically, those folks no longer exist because 2 unsatisfactory evaluations and you're terminated. The second bucket is an unsatisfactory evaluation and a satisfactory evaluation. So those would be the next people furloughed. The third group of teachers that would be furloughed would be teachers that have 2 proficient evaluations, or a proficient and a distinguished evaluation. And then the last people to be furloughed would be folks that have had 2 consecutive distinguished evaluations. So if we would have to furlough for elimination of programming, decline in enrollment, or consolidation of schools, it's pure seniority. When you furlough for economic reasons, it is within these categories of evaluations. So typically, economic furloughs are typically not used unless a district is really cash strapped, because the way you have to furlough staff is pretty draconian. When you furlough for any of those other reasons, you can do something called checkerboarding. So a very real experience I had in another district, we closed a wood shop. That wood shop teacher had a French certificate, never used. That wood shop teacher became a had the ability to ask for realignment and become a French teacher. When you furlough for economic reasons, there are no options for realignment. So that will all be enumerated in the AR.
Any questions or comments from the committee or the board about 311? Okay, we'll move that forward. 312 is evaluation of superintendent. Dr. Young, anything to add on that?
We added a definition of objective performance measures. Act 82 of 2012 refers to a superintendent's goals as objective performance measures, and they're the mutually agreed upon goals between the superintendent and the board of directors.
Questions or comments?
One minor comment, that definition is in the wrong place, it should be up above. It's in the middle of the guideline section, it should be.
Yes.
Up
Yeah, it needs to be. It needs to be
Right.
moved up above guidelines.
And it's old language, but bullet 8 under the evaluation criteria says consideration of objective data regarding a variety of things. I'd like to strike, especially because we now have the word objective and objective performance measures, I'd like to strike the word objective from that, because I think it's some of these categories for consideration are not easily objective. They're inherently, some of them are more inherently subjective. I think the simplest solution is to strike the word objective there, consideration of data.
Agreed.
There's also, Brooke, just an extra and after the new comma in that bullet. All I got on that one, thank you.
Anyone else on 312? Okay, with those,
And in my opinion, I don't think striking objective is a substantive change. I think we can move forward.
agreed.
Okay.
Okay, with those, with those comments, we will move 312 forward. 313, which is evaluation of district staff. Dr. Yanni, anything on that one?
Under authority, where it says the board directs written evaluations of all employees be performed at least annually, I would like to add the phrase in accordance with applicable law. One of the things we've talked about, there have been some employee groups in the district that have not been evaluated despite school code saying that they have to be evaluated. You know, for example, bus drivers and custodians historically have not had evaluations done. We have developed evaluation instruments for those folks now. And so I just want to be clear moving forward that every employee in the district gets evaluated.
Comments, questions? I think that makes sense. Again, a non-substantive change, so we can keep that on for second reading. Move 313 forward. We now have 2 second reading policies in the 700s. The first is 705, which is safety. Dr. Yanni, anything to add between first and second reading on that policy?
So much of what is stricken out in this policy has been moved to the administrative regulation. Working with Mr. Dazio, our solicitor, he felt that much of that language was more appropriate in the AR and not in the policy. This is a policy that I'm going to bring back on an annual basis because as we have learned multiple times over the last couple of months, there are any number of updates to safety regulations that we have to stay on top of, specifically around security guards, security officers, and whatnot. So I have this flagged in my notes that we'll bring this back on an annual basis to look at, just to make, and there may be times where we don't have to do anything to the policy, just to make sure that the policy is up to date.
Questions or comments from the board? Okay, we'll move that along. And the last one we have for second reading tonight is 707, which is community access to district facilities. Dr. Yanni, any comments on that policy?
Not on the policy. The administrative regulation, this is the policy and administrative regulation that caused quite a lot of discussion in the district several months ago, making sure that the process for usage of space is equitable, and making sure that district groups have priority over non-district groups, and making sure that even though we say that sometimes there are large facilities, i.e. the pool, that accommodate multiple groups at the same time. So we reviewed everything in the administrative regulation with Sue Lohofer, our facilities and community affairs manager, to make sure that how we are scheduling is what's reflected in writing.
Excellent. Any questions or comments from the board?
I have a few on this one.
Sure.
And because this was, you know, as Dr. Young said, because this one came up recently, I want to be careful to get it right. In the new first paragraph under guidelines, it says, and this is new language, district-sponsored activities and activities in which upper government students make up the majority of participants will be given priority when scheduling. So there used to be language that basically gave and some of it was in the sort of a ranking order of priorities. In this phrasing, these two groups have equal priority, and I don't know that they should. I would like to make it clear that district-sponsored activities are the top priority. External activities in which upper government students make up the majority of participants would be a second priority, and I would even add that external activities in which upper government residents make up the majority of participants would be a third.
Okay, so what I'll do is I will say, that sentence that says that starts with district-sponsored activities, how about if we say, priority shall be given in this order to, whatever, I'll pretty up that language, say, district-sponsored activities for our students, district-sponsored activities where our students make up the majority, and then activities that are comprised of a majority of Upper Dublin residents. Is that, am I hearing you?
Yeah, I think that the second and third are really the same thing. One is about where our students are the majority, where other residents are not our students may be the majority.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yep. Let's see, can I keep going, Jeff?
Yeah, I was just going to say that, I mean, I think that that is a non-substantive change for purposes of this policy, if everyone agrees, because we said it would be given priority, which means there would be a ranking within anyway, and we're just creating a new subset. So I think this can move forward, assuming there are no other changes on second reading.
Okay. I have two more. So I lost my tab. So there's a new word, community, in bullet 10, prohibition of community political campaigning. I don't understand what that means.
I think the import of that word is this is a policy that's about community access to district facilities. And I think there is perhaps a misperception among some people about the breadth of number 10 and how it's used as a consideration. And so I think that the insertion of the word community is to say that within the limits of the First Amendment, the school district can't stop free expression within schools, subject to certain limits that the Supreme Court has set out, which we're going to talk about probably in a little bit. But for example, with students, they get free expression within a school unless or until it impedes the educational process or things like that. So that's the constitutional test, essentially. What we're really focused on here is political campaigning by outside groups or by people that would want to use or lease the district facilities. And I think the import of that word was to be clear that we're not in any way trying to infringe upon First Amendment rights of students or even teachers to the extent that they're in our buildings. Does that make sense? And maybe we can rephrase it to communicate that better.
Yeah, so I think I understand what you're trying to get at there. If I didn't understand it, my goal in the policy language is to make sure that later when we hold this policy up to something that's going on, that we understand what we mean. And
completely agree.
And I'm not sure, is there some kind of political campaigning that's not community political campaigning would be a question that got asked. Does this bullet apply to me because what I'm doing isn't community political campaigning. It's campaigning for state representative or whatever. It's something else. So I think I'm trying to think of other phrasing that may convey what you're trying to get at. It's political campaigning by someone other than district activity, something other than district activity. Is that what we, so?
Yeah, I think we're getting closer there.
Okay, let me go to my other question because I think maybe at least the two can be solved together.
Sure.
the heading for this bulleted list is consideration for usage and leasing. And, I think what we're trying to say in I'm not sure that bullet 10 is a consideration more than it is an outright prohibition. It's not, I feel like it can be a separate paragraph and just say political campaigning, is prohibited, and then give the caveats that, you know, the three caveats that are listed underneath to soften that, as opposed to making it a bullet here, and then we don't need the word community, because campaigning is really the issue. It's not who is doing it, it's what the activity is.
What if, to try to address both of your points, would it make sense to leave it as number 10, but to rephrase it to say, to echo what is above, and maybe this is only restating in a sense, prohibition of political campaigning by persons seeking to use or lease district facilities, but while permitted. Would that, let me ask first, would that help with the ambiguity in the word community being there?
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Prohibition of political campaigning by persons seeking to use or lease district facilities, but while permitting, and then to the exceptions. What do people think of that phraseology?
It seems like we already have that word anyway. It just seems that we already have that wording. It just seems to be redundant. It's under considerations for usage and leasing. And then to put that back in number 10 just seems redundant to me.
Yeah, so maybe community is already implied, because if you're a school activity, you're already not, well, you're not leasing, but you're still doing usage. So actually, that's Jeff, why don't you and I try to agree on something, and we'll bring it to the legislative meeting as hopefully a non-substantive change, so we don't have to try to do it here in the meeting.
I'm good with that, because I think that whether the word was left in, changed, or deleted, I don't think that creates a substantive change, because it's just really nuancing the words of the policy. Everybody on the board do with that? Yeah.
I have a question now.
Sure.
What other things do we prohibit? Because it seems like there's probably other activities that we would prohibit. Why are we only mentioning campaigning?
My answer to that would be, I mean, it says considerations shall include, so there could be others, but I think my gut is telling me there have probably been requests in past history that would fall into this category, and therefore historically there's been a need to have that called out. It's not to say that this list of 10 is the be-all and end-all of the considerations that the district would use in deciding whether space should be used or leased. So there could be other.
In there, like that this is not a
Well,
comprehensive list.
I mean, to me, it's by saying shall include, it says that. But if you think you want more, we can talk about it.
I just imagine there's other. It's now sticking out to me that this is strange. This is the only thing we're prohibiting.
Yeah, that's what I was catching too, that thinking it belongs as a separate paragraph that is not exactly a consideration. But, I mean, we're not going to consider it, it's prohibited,
Well, but there are exceptions, because you could consider it if it's for a bipartisan political forum, for example, under bid. So, to me, it does become a consideration because there are exceptions, as opposed to just saying boilerplate.
So I agree with Jen's thing. I think that first thing should be shall include but are not limited to.
That's fine.
But I think if you and I can, outside the meeting, wrestle with the language and bring it on Monday, or whatever, whenever the next legislative meeting is.
If I could just be kept in the loop on that, because I have some strong thoughts. I think we're going down all this road of all this political stuff because we're trying to undo something that was done with a voter registration policy, and now I just feel like it's seeping its way into other policies, and I want to be very careful, because at the end of the day, what we want to make sure is that we don't have any partisan activity by adults on our school grounds.
Yeah, agreed, I agree, and so that is exactly what I think this bullet 10 with 3 sub-bullets is trying to capture, and it's not exactly capturing it.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I think Mark's suggestion is good, that he and I and Dr. Yanni can work on something and bring it to the board at the legislative meeting in order to just refine the language of the stated intent of this policy.
The item 10, is that something that fits better in the AR versus the policy?
No, I feel like this is policy.
You think?
Yeah, just because it's such a tenuous nature, what I don't want anyone to assume is we put it in the AR so that it could be easily changed without a board vote.
Okay. All good thoughts and comments. We will bring that back at the legislative meeting with a minor adjustment. Okay, that finishes our second readings. We'll move forward to second reading and repeals. We have a series of policies there that are for second reading and repeal. 304, 504, 304-1, 305, 306, 411, 412, 512, 413, and 414, and 514.1. The vast majority, if not all of these, are being repealed because they've been either consolidated into other policies or have been otherwise addressed in other policies. Dr. Yanni, anything to add about those repeals?
No, just that the repeal of those policies have been conversations among superintendents across the county, as people are now starting to update their policy books and merge things so that there's a more succinct way to find the information that you need to find.
Any questions or comments about those for second reading and repeal? All right, hearing none, we'll move that forward to the legislative meeting, and we'll move to our first readings for this month, of which we have 5 policies. We'll start with P105, which is curriculum development. We'll then also have 105.1 and 105.3, which are also related to curriculum through review and process. Dr. Yanni, do you want to provide a little introduction for this?
Sure. So the curriculum development policy, policy 105, actually is talking about the actual written curriculum, and then also references the textbooks or instructional resources that we use to deliver the curriculum. Much of, well, everything that is, you see redlined there, those are things that we have moved to the administrative regulation to keep the policy succinct and clean. So if anybody has any questions about that information, I'm happy to answer any of those.
I do have one comment on this policy under delegation, not exactly on what you were talking about just now, Dr. Yanni, but delegation responsibility, bullet B, there's a new language while on district property. And I'm curious why that's there. Employees in performance of their duties while on a field trip, not on district property, still should be covered, I think, by the regulations that had this.
I'm sorry, where are you? I'm sorry.
In delegation of responsibility.
Okay.
First set of bullets, bullet B. I'm in the wrong policy. Never mind. Sorry, I'll go back to that one again.
I think you're the wrong.
I'm in the wrong. I have like 25. I was trying to confuse everybody.
You just wanted to see if everyone was paying attention.
staying on 105 then, for the moment. Any questions or comments on 105?
I just want to point out that in the AR, if you look on what is stricken on the second page of the policy, where it talks about equal educational opportunities for all students, in the AR it's going to read equitable opportunities for all students, because equal is not equal and equitable are not the same things there. The other thing that will be in the AR, sometimes when we make some purchases, things cannot be easily adapted to students by the district. And so one of the things that we'll make a point in the AR of saying is when, if there's an instructional resource that cannot be easily adapted by the district, that we will give kids options to get that same exposure or practice in other ways. You know, there's a couple things, especially if you think of the stuff in Zern, the elementary math, if you look at even some of the ALEC stuff that's not easily adaptable. If we have kids that need those adaptations, we'll make sure that there are other resources available. And that's just good. That's just good teaching and instructional practice.
Anything else on first reading of policy 105? Mark, I actually think you were in 705, but let's finish these first readings and then we can hop back to your comment. I got a note, we'll go back to you, all right? Okay. Okay, we'll move 105 forward for first reading. 105.1 is the curriculum review by parents, guardians, students, and community members. Dr. Young.
One of the things that I'll say as a preamble to this, this is a policy that we're also going to bring back each year for review as a way to bring light to it, because there are a number of times through a school year that we will receive requests for parents to review either assessments or different parts of the curriculum, and we want to make sure that we make that process easy for parents, guardians, families, community members to know about and easy to access. As I look at this, the language that is stricken is really administrative regulation language. So if you look at the second page of that policy, items 1 through 5 have been moved to the administrative regulation. I do want to have conversation about, under purpose, the word assessment techniques, or the phraseology there. Mrs. Sherbier had spoken with Mr. Wallach and then also spoke with me about this. We originally took that out, but taking that out means that what we don't mean here is for parents to be able to view the assessment, but rather for parents to get information about how we are assessing kids. So if it's okay with everyone, I'd like to leave that word technique in there. So it's stricken now, but we'll leave that word in there.
So that came out because I made a comment last month about techniques, because all of the other things that we're talking about here are things that can be reviewed. Assessment techniques are not things that can be reviewed in any meaningful way. It's a question. How do you review a verbal answer? It's not a piece of paper or a checklist or a.
Do you mean methods?
I don't think it's that word that matters.
I think we mean assessments, and so I understand the concern about actually seeing the assessments.
I think there's a difference between standardized assessments and the classroom-based assessment tools that are used on a daily basis. To me, this is meant to read, and maybe I'm misreading it, that parents want to see some of the standardized tools. Am I?
Yes, correct? No, that's correct, and that's really the intent or the spirit of the policy. Sorry, the spirit of the intent. It's not to look at, say, the test that I create for my fourth graders, right, my math test, but it would be to look at the PSSA or to look at the Keystone or to look at the PASA. So
So can we just put in standardized assessments instead? Would that cover us?
I think it does.
And would reduce the ambiguity there?
Yeah, that would be more comfortable for me.
I have a question about that. Would that include like the star?
You can't do it with STAR because it's computer adaptive.
So if a parent.
And it's not standardized anyway, that's right. Good point.
But like if a parent wanted to see what star was about, is there something to show them or explain them?
We can give them the information about the test. What they can't see actual questions. Like we have a few questions, like a question bank that we can share. They have like the samples, but they can't. Even I can't go into STAR and look and see what the questions are going to be because they're automatically generated.
And I was just bringing that up because if we said standardized, then that would eliminate star, which is one of the things we're using to evaluate our kids.
You know, we could say, I mean, I think we're getting into the vast majority of people that are looking at this are really looking at it to evaluate whether their child's going to participate in PSSAs and Keystone. So I think unless we're getting massive requests to look at STAR, to me, and you said we're going to review every year, so let's see how it holds up for a year potentially.
Right, and I think I'll say this. I think there wasn't a data culture. We now have a data culture. I think because there was no data culture, there was a little bit of over-reliance on STAR. Now that we have a data culture set up with other common assessments, I think we're going to see less of a focus on STAR and more on some more holistic type of assessments. Does that make sense? Okay. Yes.
When we say standardized tests, do we need to define that more fully, state standardized tests, or?
I actually have a note here that says state standardized tests.
Yeah.
Excellent. Any other questions, comments, or discussion on 105.1?
I just want to make everyone aware, we used to get, when the PSSAs used to come to us, we would get them a week to 10 days before we actually had to administer them. Last year, schools received them, we received booklets at Jarrowtown Elementary School the day before kids were scheduled to take the assessment. So I think there were some parents and guardians that were feeling like we were not being transparent. They wanted to look at the assessments and we said we don't have them. The Department of Education, we received communication last week. We will get them in a very short time frame before the assessments again for test security. So when we get those requests, we'll make sure that the responses back to parents, guardians, community members this year explain the fact that as soon as we get them, we'll let them be viewed, but there is a chance that they'll come very close to the actual administration.
Will the state make any accommodations then for if parents want to view them and could they view an old sample?
Is there a deadline for submitting the opt-out form? And is that deadline?
No, I'm just worried that.
No. I mean, the opt-out form, last year we had kids take the first day or two of the PSSA and then an opt-out form came for the rest of the sections. No, I think the concern last year was that was the first year that it came in such a tight time frame. There was usually plenty of time. We were scrambling to get student labels on books to administer the assessments. They came so late.
Anything else on 105.1? Hearing none, if those amendments, we will move that forward. 105.3 is curriculum renewal and review process. Dr. Yanni, any comments on that?
So last year when we brought Mr. Hoffman on and we started to look at how we were going to move forward with our curriculum renewal cycle, for a couple of years the district did curriculum summits where there was a little bit of curriculum work done in just about every area of the curriculum every single year. And we need to go back to a very coherent cycle so that we can devote the energy and the funds that are needed to do refresh. And so this policy actually articulates, and the AR will articulate our curriculum review cycle, making sure that everyone is aware that we're no longer going to try to quote unquote fix things or enhance every area of the curriculum every single year, but rather devote some intentional focus over a period of time to each area of the curriculum. So we actually moved the cycle to the AR, and then we also struck the language about middle states accreditation. Middle states accreditation is no longer something that is required.
Questions or comments from the board? Hearing none, we'll move that one forward, and we'll move forward to policy 210.2, which is the student allergies policy. Dr. Young?
So not really any change in the policy. Like we did with medications in the AR, we expanded allergies. The previous AR focused almost solely on epinephrine and EpiPens. We want to make sure that we were making that broader than just looking at or focusing on EpiPens. And we worked with our school nurses on that.
I only have one question. The state requires some training around this. Is it worthwhile to say under one, provide for appropriate training of staff to comply with?
Sure. Why don't we say in accordance with applicable law?
Thank you.
And just so everyone is aware, at the beginning of the year, we do EpiPen training, and then if kids have very specific needs or specific allergies, anyone that would come in contact with them on a regular basis, our certified school nurses do training with those folks.
We can probably strike 7 then, conform to applicable. It just seems like it's hanging out there as like a dangling, because the remaining I don't think are covered by law per se. Right.
Also, we'll make sure that in the AR, it specifically talked about individualized health plans, IHPs and 504s. We're also going to include language about IEPs, because if students have an IEP for something else and they have allergies or whatnot, that medical information is included in the student's IEP. I can't take credit for that. That was one of our board members.
Anything further on 210.2? Excellent, we'll move that along. And our last first reading for tonight is 361, which is a new policy entitled Politics. Dr. Young, you want to give an introduction to that one?
Sure. So the genesis of this politics policy is a vehicle or a means to make it overt of how we're committed to and required to remain nonpartisan, being the adults in the system, and also to provide some structure for dealing with situations where staff violates that, or they endorse a political figure, or they espouse political beliefs in a course or a classroom, and they don't give the opposing view. The whole goal of public education is to provide, I hate to use the phrase fair and balanced, but that's really what we're trying to do. And when it becomes too partisan, we really, while students are protected under the First Amendment to say much more than adults in the system can, we want to make sure that we're very overt with our staff about what they can and cannot talk about, say, and do.
And I'll just add, I think this policy is modeled after the religion policy that was passed not too long ago, to similar to not sponsoring one religion, here in this policy, not sponsoring any political partisanship. Any questions or comments from the board about this policy?
I actually really like it. I know at first I kind of blanched that the title was politics and not civics or something, but it's not about civics, and it really, I like the fact that we're just saying directly this is the expectation that we have of the people in our buildings, and I don't think it's ambiguous, and I like that about the policy, so from my standpoint, it's a good start at least.
Mark?
I'll say we took a very circuitous route to get here.
Right.
But I do think this is an important policy to protect nonpartisanship within our buildings, and while that wasn't necessarily the explicit goal of all of the variations that led us here, I'm glad we got led here to arrive at this final, hopefully final version.
Yeah, agreed, and I'm very appreciative of the discourse that happened among the committee, the administration, and the community that has come out to feed us, back some information, so. I like it.
Agreed. Any other questions or comments? Okay, we will move those forward for first reading at the legislative meeting. We also have under 5.04 our agenda, 3 policies for first reading repeal, P106, P107, and P108. And I believe that these are all being repealed because they are now covered in other policies, or they just become outdated in the way that the policies have changed over the years. Dr. I have that correct?
Correct, yeah, thank you.
So any questions or comments on the repeal of those 3 policies for first reading? Hearing none, we can move those forward. I do want to go back just because Mr. Sirota raised it to policy 705. That's up for second reading.
I apologize that I didn't, I was looking in the wrong place when we talked about 705 before.
While we're here, let's get it.
So in 705, under delegation of responsibility, the first set of bullets, bullet B has new language while on district property. And I'm curious why we're narrowing that statement.
The concern that I had without some type of narrowing, I hear what you're saying about field trips, is that technically an employee could be performing his or her duty at their house, grading a paper, preparing a lesson plan, and we don't have any safety obligation over that employee at that time. Now, maybe on district property is too narrow, but I think we need some qualifier there.
Yeah, that's a good catch.
I would not have thought of that.
Yeah. but I do think while on district property is too narrow. I think it's a good catch.
I think we could say while
Executing the school business during the regular work hour? No.
So I know Dr. Davis was a superintendent in her previous life, so maybe she'll correct me here if I'm wrong. Or maybe she'll just correct me privately after the meeting, not to embarrass me. But I've always taken the stance that if you're on, a bus stop is still considered, in essence, district property because school rules apply there. Same thing on field trips, same thing as when we're off-site, it's technically considered school property.
I think this may be a good question for the solicitor.
Yeah.
To come up with some language that expresses.
I'll call Ed tomorrow.
Yeah.
Maybe he thinks we're nuts.
He probably does, but that's okay.
That's fine.
That's what we pay him for. To
Right.
we're nuts.
Well, then he won't even charge us the 15 minutes if he says we're not. So that may come back then for, sorry, is this
It's currently a second reading.
reading,
We'll
but
see how it comes
yeah,
back.
if it's substantive, we'll bring it back as a another reading next month.
Excellent. Okay, with that, I think we have covered all of our items in the policy report recommendation section, so it is time for community input. If any community members have any questions or comments, please come up, state your name and area of residence, and go for it.
Janita Tell, I know you're gonna talk to the lawyer tomorrow, but How about school-sponsored events or trips? Would it capture that to me? And not to bring back 707 and section 10 yet again. But to me, we're all under community access. So I don't, right? So we don't even have to say persons using or leasing because we're already saying in above that the usage or leasing. So we are already specific to community and specific to leasing and using. So, like, I don't know that you have to redo that. I think prohibition of political campaigning, right, altogether, because it's already implied that it's a community, and it's already implied that it's persons using or leasing, right, because it's already stated. All right, that's it, thanks.
I'm Cologne, Fort Washington. I just wanted to say thank you for having the policy meetings during the evening, and following right after Ed committee, so it's just that one night that you kind of have to commit. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I just want to say, Ms. Evans and I have been, well, actually, I should say Ms. Evans has been updating it, give her the credit, of the policies that are left to work on. So we're coming to the end of, well, not to the end, but to the last batch of policies that we have to look at. Next month is a discussion item. I'm going to work on a cycle so that, you know, our policies became very old and a lot of work has been done over the last couple of years to update everything. And so I'm putting together a cycle document so that we never find ourselves in the position of policies that are 10 or more years old, and then we have to refresh the policy book all at the same time. So that'll be a discussion item at next month's meeting.
Excellent. Anything else from the committee or the board? Great. With that, we will announce the next policy committee meeting will be Wednesday, April 1st. As my predecessor in the last meeting said, no kidding, at 7:15, or immediately following the education committee right here in the Cardinal room. And with that, we are adjourned. Have a great evening, everyone. Thank you so much.